You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
We are going to be going into the topic of how much is too much when it comes to exercise. So the way that I'm going to approach this today is that of longevity. Because in the short term, there are things that you may do for your body that will actually get you better body transformation results only in the short term. You get the same results in the long term if you're doing the same thing, but actually the things that you might do in the short term that you're doing right now could actually have a grave effect on your longevity. And the reason why I wanted to bring you this show is that I know a lot of us are going to be looking at their nutrition, their supplementation, their diet, and their exercise in a different light in the coming year. And I think that we should. I think every single year we should explore all possibilities, what the latest research shows us, and then also, is this balanced as well from an Ayurvedic perspective, which again, in Ayurveda is always about the truth of life. That's literally what Ayurveda means, the science of life or the truth of life. And it's there to teach us something that much of the time we've forgotten in our modern day science and constant research. So I think we always have to take it from both approaches. The reason that I'm looking at it is that I want to maintain a good physique, but I don't want to do that at the sacrifice of running my body down and becoming burnt out, and also really wiping out my mitochondria, which are the powerhouses, the energy sources of my body, and now we're finding may even have a lot to do with cancer and also immunity and longevity. So much more has to be studied in terms of our mitochondria. We know where they are, we know what they do, but we didn't always know, or we don't always know, the magnitude of the effect they can have on our body. So one of the things that I used to do in exercise, and I think many of us used to do this in high school, college, and maybe even in our 20s, I would say many people still doing it today, is that we are overtraining. We are overtraining, and it's hard not to do. It's hard not to do because when you're in the gym or you are exercising, you're saying, I want to maximize my time in the gym. So it makes total sense from that standpoint, and I'm with you the same way. For me, what I'm about to share with you today, it's hard for me to accept from someone that in life typically does push it to the limits. I really do. Like whatever I'm doing, I like to give it my all. And my all means I feel like I left it all there. Well, the truth is that type of mentality burns you out. I have to take my own medicine. I really do. And I'm going to be changing my routine, not for the exercises that I choose, I'll talk about that in a moment, but the way in which I train. So here's the thing. I talked about this, spoken about this many years. I learned it in bioregulatory medicine. I learned it from some brilliant doctors and mentors before me. And it's something called neuroendoimmunology. It's almost never talked about, but it is the secret to why some people can't get well again, and it is the secret to why many people do not have any energy. I'm going to break it down for you right now. So we, as a culture, as a Western-based culture, whether you're in the United States or wherever you are in the world, if you are part of a culture that is always about progress and pushing and moving forward, and you follow that same subscription, which I do as well, what happens is it begins to wear on your nervous system. How does it do that? Why does it do that? Well, the reason is this. Your nervous system is what regulates output, what regulates essentially how stressed your body feels. the perceived survival-based situation. And if we're pushing it with family activities, we're pushing it with work, and we're pushing it with our workouts, and we're not getting enough adequate sleep, and maybe then we're even fasting for longer periods of time, we're under constant stress. That's our nervous system. So because of this, what our body then does is it rebounds with something called the endocrine system. So the endocrine system is something that people are going to be more familiar with, especially if you've been listening to the Cabral concept, because this is what we talk about in terms of hormones. Now, I know a lot of times we refer to it as more like cortisol levels and levels of norepinephrine or adrenaline or stress, but honestly, it's what stress through the nervous system does to the rest of the hormones as well. So you'll find chronically trained or overtrained athletes or your everyday person with lower levels of testosterone. That happens in men all the time. So if I'm working with an athlete and I see that they have lower levels of testosterone, for me to push them to do more is going to be more detrimental. Their body is already telling me that it's in a state of exhaustion, that it is burnt out. So what I need to do is help them nourish the body. Yes, part of that sleep, part of it's nutrition, supplementation, but it's actually everything. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more today as well. But more training will not help boost that testosterone, even though we see that, sure, squats and things like that boost testosterone at around 10 repetitions or so. But here's the thing, not done chronically. So that's what I want to go over, and I'll get to that in just a moment. And also in women, what do we see with women that are chronically stressed, we're chronically neurologically stressed? We see lower levels of progesterone all the time, meaning their levels of estrogen fairly normal. They run something called a moon metabolism stress test, also called the thyroid adrenal hormone. And we see that they have normal levels of estrogen around day 19, 20, 21 of their cycle. But it's their progesterone levels when they should be at their highest are actually fairly low. I mean, really low. Really, it's why I believe we have so much issues around fertility in this country too, because of this overstress. And then another part that we see is thyroid. When the body and the nervous system and the endocrine system have been stressed, the thyroid will begin to lower metabolic rate. And it does this very simply, very easily. Slow processes that are not as valuable to survival, or slow processes that will more likely help this organism live long and live longer. So if I slow metabolic rate, I slow all of the digestive processes. I slow circulation in the body. I slow metabolic rate in terms of how many calories you need per day, right? Basal metabolic rate. So resting metabolic rate. So these are all important factors to look at. Now, what happens next when the hormone system has been stressed out as well, the endocrine system? The immune system begins to suffer. We have lower levels of our frontline defense. So if you are someone that always has sinus issues, always has lung-based issues, always has, mucosal, sore throats, etc. issues, or even urinary tract issues, you most likely are suffering from a chronically depleted and overstressed neuroendoimmune system. And most likely your doctor will never mention this to you. One, it's not taught in medical school, not in this way. All of these things are taught in medical school, but not put together and not in this framework. But if you look at something called bioregulatory medicine, homotoxicology, and you look at the Ayurvedic levels of disease or pathophysiology, I've done shows on that, the 6 phases of disease. Hopefully we'll link that up. So my team, if you're listening today, at episode 1413, I will link up my previous show on homotoxicology as well as the Ayurvedic phases of disease, because in the United States or in modern medicine, we only talk about the last 2. But you will see yourself progressing towards disease by these particular states. Okay, so here's the thing. I really started getting into this even to a higher level. And the reason for today's show, even though I've been studying things like heart rate variability and the levels of hormones for quite some time, there was a TED Talk done by, well, actually, I believe he's a doctor. I know he's an exercise physiologist, but regardless, he's a scientist. And his work, well, let's give you his name first. His name is Dr. Stephen Seiler. And I believe he's a doctor. He's at least an exercise physiologist. But what's interesting is this. He did his formal work here in the United States. But he kind of did something what I did, is went overseas, actually did some study in Norway, and looked at the athletes training there and a lot of the gold medalists and endurance-based athletes, and he said, how are they training? I want to know what's different from lab studies versus the real world. So when Steven Seiler was giving this TEDx talk, and I will actually, why don't I actually embed that for you today? So again, just head on over to stevencabral.com/1413. I'll embed that so you can watch the video right on that webpage. And what I took out of it was this, is that the absolute best in the world are training differently than your average everyday person who believes that they need to be pushing it at 100% every time they're in the gym. And I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty much the same way. When I go to the gym, I like to work out and I like to push myself. But what we're finding is that our body's ability to recover as we age begins to go down. So what happens to us is we actually have less adaptability the harder we train, the longer we train. So the more years that we continue to do this, the weaker our neuroendoimmune system actually becomes. So my goal today is to present you with, at least hear me out, hear out the research, as to something that you might want to be thinking about for the new year. I'm going to be doing it myself. It's going to take some adopting. It really is. It's going to take me moving into a different mindset. But my mindset is going to be, if it's good enough for the best powerlifters in the world, and it's good enough for gold medalists, then maybe it should be good enough for me as well. So I'll tell you though, just one more story I want to share before we get right into the meat of what you should be doing, is that I believe one of the reasons why I did not recover as quickly and I relapsed so much was that I was pushing myself hard in college to do well in school. I was pushing myself hard to go out on the weekends, be social, even though my immune system was telling me get more rest, get more sleep. And also I was pushing myself hard in the gym 4 days a week, sometimes 5 days a week. So all of those things were not allowing me to properly recover, which is why I would start to maybe get a little bit better and then relapse again, because I was chronically under stress from every area of life. Maybe I was doing well in diet. I think I was. I was eating way too much protein, but I was doing well, pretty well there. But if I go through my de-stress protocol, exercise, no, too much stress. Stress, yes, with school, with relationships, all those things, too much stress. Toxins, I didn't know anything about toxins from the ages of 18 to, or anyway up to essentially mid-20s. I didn't know about any of that. So I would take probably not very good supplements, and I would eat maybe not the best and cleanest food. For me, it was just about the macros. It's like what people talk about today, who cares if it's organic? Who cares if it's grass-fed? Well, they don't really know any better. And again, I didn't know any better back then too. So if I look at emotional stress, lots of emotional distress, lots of it. Still wasn't recovered, dealing with diseases of the body, lots of stress, right? Trying to do well in school, all of those different things. And then we have supplements. My supplements were actually decent. I had studied so much about nutrition and supplementation. The nutrition and supplementation were the only strong areas I think that I had. And then success mindset, not so much. I was stubborn. I was willing to push forward. That's maybe what I had going for me, but not success in terms of a healthy mindset, that's for sure. So when you look at that, that is someone who's prone and ripe to relapse all the time and not know why, not have any conclusion as to why it's happening. So a big part of that is overexerting yourself in the gym. So now let's go into it. The crux of my argument is that you can't be overdoing it. But here's the bigger problem. You still do want to exercise. You still do want to move your body. You still want more days than not exercising at home or in the gym. And you also want to get at least your 150 minutes per week. So none of that has changed. Everything that I've shared with you on previous podcasts has not changed. You still want to be getting 30 minutes 5 days a week as the minimum. 30 to 60 minutes 5 days a week. That is the goal, okay? But here's the difference. I study everyone. I really do. I'm researching, I'm studying, I'm questioning. I'm asking, is this true? Does this hold up with Ayurveda? And I'll talk about that in a moment. But the biggest issue is this. If you are always trying to force out one more rep and force adaptation, your body breaks down to a greater degree. And that simply means this. If you're doing that day in and day out at the gym, you not only are not going to be able to recover fully, it's doing more damage to your nervous system than good. And more damage most likely to your mitochondria than good. So the goal is this: damage and then recovery. So when you look at the best athletes in the world, it was shocking to me. This is an absolutely shocking statistic to me. And this isn't across the board. You'll always find outliers in everything. Some people push themselves super hard in every workout, and they are genetically gifted. Again, there are always going to be super genetically gifted individuals. There's no doubt about that. I do not think that I am a super genetically gifted individual. I do not. I think I'm always working against my genetics in order to maintain good health. I think I'm working against all those autoimmune, all those inflammatory, mastocytosis, all of those issues, gut issues. I think I'm working against those every day. But the good thing is I think I'm doing a good job. So I stay healthier, and every year I feel better than the last. Honestly, every year I feel healthier than the last. And I run the labs, and the labs prove it out. My labs prove it out. My testosterone, so again, my nervous system has to be doing pretty well. My testosterone is higher than it should be at 18 years old. My cortisol levels are within the proper range. So it's like, this all can happen even if you don't have great genetics, and I'm living proof of that. The only reason I share those statistics is because I don't have good genetics. At 17 years old, I had super high cholesterol. I had all these inflammatory-based markers off. I had autoimmune diseases. I had type 2 diabetes. I had Addison's disease. You're not supposed to recover from these things, even if you have horrible genetics. But the problem is I had to start to learn these things the hard way. So let's get back to it. Let's not learn from me. Let's learn from the best in the world. The best in the world are the people who train for many hours a day. And that is like the Olympic gold medalists. And so these are people who are, believe it or not, following the 80-20 rule without probably even knowing it. Now, if you don't know what the 80-20 rule is, I would love you to go back to one of my previous podcasts on that, the Pareto's principle. And that means that 80% of your results come from 20% of what you do. It's an amazing principle. 80% of your results in life come from about 20% of what you do. Now, you do 100% of things, right? The 100% makes up what you're doing. But 80% of those results come from 20% of what you do. And this is what they found. These top athletes, we're talking, again, Olympic gold medalists. And these are people that were rowers, that were skiers, you name it. And they were going hard about 15% of the time. 20% was maximum. The rest of the time, they were still exercising, but they were maintaining a volume of about 60% of what they could do. It was about 65%. So that means for the rest of their training regimen, they were only going about 60, 70%. That means they were not going to failure. Actually, nowhere near that. When I read that and when I saw that, and again, these are with labs. This is what muscle biopsies. This is in-depth testing. They just knew they had to follow the program. And part of it was instinctual, part of it based on their coach's program from doing this for decades with athletes. They knew how quickly they would get burnt out. Some of the top power lifters in the world, they only max out twice a year at competitions or whenever their competition is. And that's an unbelievable statistic because that means when they're in the gym, they're still training hard. What they're not doing, though, is typically maxing out every single workout. But your average person is. I mean, for the most part, I do. Like, there's no doubt about that because I like to push myself to that limit. It's something I'm gonna start to, especially as I get older, I'm going to start to truly, as they say, train smarter, not harder. So what I'm going to do is still push myself. Now watch this. This is where I'm going to give you hopefully the meat, as they say, the proverbial meat that you can take away. Let's say you're training 5 times a week. You're exercising 5 times a week for 30 minutes. And again, get into home workouts. If you're not doing any home workouts, all you need is 30 minutes. If you do a 30-minute workout at the gym, what do you need? 30 minutes to get to the gym, get ready, get on the gym floor, 30 minutes to exercise, then 30 minutes to get home. That's an hour and a half. That's an hour and a half workout. You only did 30 minutes in there. So get used to doing more home workouts. That's what I have been for years. And they're just super efficient, 20 to 30 minutes. And that's because my girls can be there. They can be hanging on my legs. When I'm doing pull-ups, I can have them when I'm doing my rest sets hang from a pull-up bar. So just get used to it. Just get used to doing a few home workouts per week. It's the only way most busy people will be able to fit in 5 workouts a week. And so it also shows that you could hop on a bike at home and you could do 20, 30 minutes of biking while, if you need to, returning emails, making a phone call, whatever it is. Because here's the thing. What is 60 to 70%? 60 to 70% means this. You can go by rate of perceived exertion. It means that you could be having a conversation with a friend while exercising. That's, believe it or not, that is the rate of perceived exertion. Now, will it be your most, fluent and easiest conversation ever? No, but you should be able to have a normal, slightly strained conversation with a friend. Once you get above 75, 80%, then you're only can say a few words at a time. That's it. At 90+%, when you're pushing yourself to the limit, that is really when you're just kind of gasping for air. You can't speak to anybody else. So here's the nice thing, though. And again, when I look back to all the textbooks I've read over the years, a lot of these, and I look at the Eastern European strength and conditioning specialist, they were doing 2 workouts a week. That's it. 2 workouts a week, 2 hard workouts a week. Now, everything was focused then on recovery, but there's some science to this. If we look at the 80-20 rule and these gold medalists doing 20% of their workouts hard, if you worked out 5 days a week, you could do 1 really hard workout a week, right? Yes, you could. So let's say on Saturday, that was your hard workout day, or maybe it's a Monday, whatever it might be. I would pick the day where you can actually get some sleep that night and sleep the night before. That's when I would make your hard workout day. So for me, my hard workout day probably should be a weekend if I look at it. That's the night hopefully I'm going to get a little bit more sleep. So a Saturday or Sunday would be that ideal day for a hard workout. Now again, get it in whenever you can get it in. But you push yourself to the limit 1 day a week. Now it doesn't actually mean though go for that forced rep. You can push yourself to the limit as much as you can do. Not in terms of volume. Again, maybe it's 15 total sets, 18 total sets. Go back to my previous shows if you don't know what that means. But it's 1 day a week you're going to push yourself to that limit. Now, the other 4 days a week, if you're doing 5 workouts for the week, you'll still exercise. But it will be going lighter. It'll be going 60 to 70%. What does that mean? If your goal is 12 repetitions for a set, well, it means you could have done 15, 16 reps. That's it. That's what it means. Now, the next week, can you increase weight? You absolutely can. If it still stays within your 60 to 70%, that's the interesting thing. Your body's still going to adapt and get stronger. The biggest difference is this. It is not neurologically as demanding, which means that it won't actually stress your hormones as much or deplete your immune system, which means you're going to recover faster. The inflammation is not going to be as great. And then you still give yourself that 1 day a week where when you do your 12th rep, it's your 12th rep. There's no doubt about that. Couldn't have done a 13th. Maybe you could have, but that's it. You get the point. And you're not going to do any forced reps. The forced reps might be every 12 weeks, every 3 to 6 months. That might be like a forced rep training week. That's it. And that's it. So that's part of what's called a periodization model, where we undulate. So we start at lower intensities, then we ramp up, and then we go back down. Now, when you're looking, though, at a typical week, that's it. That's what you would look at. Let's say you train 4 times a week. Okay. So maybe once a week to every other week, you do 1 hard workout. That's it. That's what it's going to be for your average person. And that's what I wanted to share with you. I am not saying not to exercise. If anything, hopefully in the podcast, you heard me say 5 days a week, 150 minutes or more per week of exercise. I honestly believe it's one of those missing links of why people are not absorbing as much glucose. You heard me talk about this week a lot about blood sugar. Check out Tuesday's show if you did not. Check out Tuesday's show of this past week. That was episode 1411. And then I'll also be doing one next Tuesday, I believe, on why diabetes is so prevalent? Why about 20% of people are going to have diabetes? Potentially even more. I mean, they're looking at 1 in 3 people. Adolescents, 1 in 5. I mean, the statistics are insane by 2030 of how quickly it's climbing. And it's not just about food. It also has to do with exercise and other factors as well. But what I want you to think about is this. Train more days a week than not. That means 4, okay? 4 days a week. But you want to get in your endurance-based work. You want to get in your resistance work. You want to keep it between 60 and 70% exertion. 1 time a week, you can let that inner athlete out. You can definitely blow it out. I still want to do it once a week. And you just simply do not want to crush your body every time you're in the gym. And I know that we all have that mentality. Well, a lot of us do. That you just want to push it. Like you're there, you want to make the most of your time. But what we're finding is that does not lead to longevity. That does not lead to a healthy nervous system or immune system. It's going to lower the mood, lower the hormones, really lower the immune system and begin to burn you out. So hopefully today's podcast was helpful. This will not be the last time I talk on this specific topic. So please do feel free to reach out, leave your comments on Instagram on today's post in particular. Over the next day or two, I always look at the previous post, so do feel free to leave it. Just my name on Instagram at Stephen Cabral. Thank you so much. And again, if this podcast was helpful, please do feel free to share it with anyone you believe it can serve. I will link up the previous podcasts on this, and I will also leave I'll embed the actual inspiring TED Talk that got me to say once and for all, okay, I need to share this with others as well. All right, take care, everyone. Thank you. Did you know that the body really only becomes sick or imbalanced in only 2 ways? Over time, you become deficient in vital nutrients, and you also accumulate toxins internally and from the environment. As those nutrients diminish and you increase your total toxic load, your body then begins to show the first signs of dis-ease. It's actually quite predictable, and the good news is that if we know how you began to fill up that proverbial rain barrel, we also know how to empty it to begin the healing process. I was fortunate enough to learn this ancient healing process from my mentor after suffering from debilitating diseases for close to a decade. It was only when I began to implement these techniques did I finally overcome my illnesses and go on to live a life of energy and vitality that I now enjoy. I'd like to share with you now what I discovered after traveling all over the world and how to combine the best of ancient healing wisdom with state-of-the-art science. Allow me to teach you exactly how I've been able to help over 250,000 people to empty their rain barrel and begin to transform their body and lives into what they've always hoped they could be. To get your copy of the international bestseller, The Rain Barrel Effect, simply go to stephencabral.com/rainbarrel.